So this morning, we're just going to do a little with Jack and Mirabai, a little reflection on some of the themes of the movie, Becoming Nobody. And then at some point, we'll have some Q&A. And at some point, Ram Dass is going to come and hang out with us. I think we're going to do a little bit of practice, mantra practice, which is what he wants to do. So, I think Krishnadas will come as well. And in the second half of the morning, Krishnadas is going to get with Ravi Svoboda and have a chat with him. So that'll be interesting as well. So, as you've all seen the movie, the first part of the movie is really dedicated to something that's been dear to Ram Dass his whole teaching life, which is identifying where we are in terms of our identities, our roles in life, and how that really sets up a story in our heads that we tend to believe, because we do believe our thoughts, unfortunately, which is why it's a great thing that these people brought back Vipassana, meditation, which is how we met Jack and Joseph and Sharon. And it is the one great thing for me personally that gives leverage to not believe in those thoughts and not chase them and not believe in the story. But I'd like to say to you, can you give us some hints around the way in which that all gets developed and how hard it is to lose these kind of habitual patterns that create the identity and the role, all of which is a difficult day-to-day perspective if we are completely lost in and sticking to
lost us. Well, my favorite two-line verse from Ryokan, who is a Zen master and the most beloved poet of Japan, he wrote, "Last year a foolish monk, this year no change." So that half sums up the response that I have to make to that question.
You're right.
But it's interesting in watching Ram Dass and the evolution of his teaching, because you get these dual messages in the movie and in what Ram Dass presented. One message is you have to practice, and you have to do this, and you have to learn a discipline, and you have to, in some way, employ those tools to transform the way you live in the world. And then the other message, which has also been really important for me as I've matured as a teacher, is called starting with the result, or living the fruit. Because there's some, you may all have noticed it, some problematic suffering that we get into, spiritual suffering, when we make it a progressive path that you're going to get somewhere. If only I'd gone to India and been with Maharaji, then everything would be fine. I know some of those people who went to be with Maharaji, and they're
Not so fine.
so, and they've done years of practice too. So, and I don't want to denigrate either side of this equation, but there's a part of it that says that, and Ram Dass articulates it so beautifully, that where we're going is here, where we are. It can't be any other place. Any other place is just imagination, is just thought. And that it's possible to be here not so identified with your personality and your views. You'll still have them. And Ram Dass's phrase, that his personality is like his pet. They're there, he feeds it and kind of appreciates it, but doesn't try to get rid of it. That shift from practicing in order to become something or be something, rather then practice is more a way of letting go, of seeing what's in the way in this moment and realizing where is there to go? There's nowhere to go but here. And then how do you want to be here? Well, when you tune in, what is there but love, really, in the end? So it's definitely not about perfecting yourself, because you've tried that a long time, right? And how far did it get you? It is, as Ramdas would say, it's about perfecting your love. And yet, as you say, Raghu, there are practices. And one of the most beautiful things in practice of mindfulness or mindful loving awareness is that as you start to get quiet, you can observe your thoughts, as you said, and all the beliefs you have, and you observe your emotions, and you go, oh yeah, I feel this way about it, really adamantly, and then a little while later, you don't feel that way. And you start to see how completely ephemeral the things that you use to construct your life are. I mean, I could go on, but I'll
No, good, that's good, keep going. There, right there, that ephemeral, yeah.
We were going to do short answers, so anyway, I'm sort of torn. That's the problem with being a teacher. You kind of turn the thing on and it's just all like... we make everything so solid. The beliefs that we have, the thoughts, the emotions, and so forth that we have. It's like the little girl who was traveling with her mom. They lived on the East Coast and they came out to California and she lost a tooth. She was 7 years old, little Cindy. And she said, Mama, can the tooth fairy travel all the way to California? And her mother said, absolutely. And then the grandmother took her aside and said, why are you telling your 7, 8-year-old girl still talking about the tooth fairy? Isn't she going to find out and realize they should be betrayed by these parents who, lie to her? So when they got home, her daughter Cindy lost another tooth. And she said, Mama, she said, I'm going to put it under my pillow, but I've been wondering, how does the tooth fairy get in? And she says, through the window. And then the little girl says, well, shouldn't we unlock the window then? And her mom said, oh, I do that after you go to sleep. And then she looks and she says, Mama, why does the tooth fairy want everybody's teeth? So the mom paused for a minute and said, okay, I think it's time to break the news to her. She said, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're old enough now to understand better. In fact, I am the tooth fairy. And the little girl wept for a while, the great disappointments of our childhood, right? And then before she was sort of snuggling, getting ready to go to sleep, she said, I have one more question. What do you wear? See, that's how thought works, We have it, and even when we know it's just a thought, we get so identified with it, and the practice of Vipassana, or just of mindful loving awareness, allows us to actually have the experience of stepping back and saying, oh, isn't that an interesting, or look at the level of attachment, or I really believe that one, or I hate that, whatever, to be able to have the spacious awareness to say, oh, look at that, isn't that interesting? Boy, really, as Ramdas would say, caught in that one, aren't we? With a little bit of a smile.
Beautiful. Another theme that we wanted to discover and talk about a little bit, I'm just going to read something from my favorite Lama, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. Those of you who don't know who that is, look him up. Okay, he left us in the 80s, but he's one of the great Lamas, and there's one particular book called 100 Verses of Advice that I would recommend to everybody. So another theme in the movie, to me, it's the most powerful antidote to getting caught in our identities, roles, and minds, and that's seva, service. So here's what Dilgo Khyentse has to say. All difficulties come from not thinking of others. Whatever you're doing, look constantly into the mirror of your mind and check whether your motive is for yourself or for others. Gradually, you will develop the ability to master your mind in all circumstances. And by following in the footsteps of the accomplished masters of the past, you will gain enlightenment in a single lifetime. A good mind is like a rich ground of gleaming gold, lighting up the whole sky with its golden radiance. But if body, speech, and mind are not tamed, there is very little chance that you will achieve any realization whatsoever. Be aware of your thoughts, words, and actions at all times, and if they take the wrong direction, your study and practice will not be of any use. So all difficulties come from not thinking of others. Mirabai is well versed and has been involved in the establishment of Seva, this great organization curing blindness in the world, with Ram Dass and many other non-profits that were dedicated in one way or the other to the idea of service to humanity. It is part of Love, Serve, Remember. It's what we were given from Maharaji, and I just think it's one great way to get out of our minds and self-interest. It's by just what he says, thinking of others and taking action. But can you talk to us a little bit about, from your experience?
Yes. First of all, I want to say it is so great sitting up here and looking out at all of you. I wish every one of you could have this experience. It's fabulous. Every single one of your faces are just, sometimes when you're speaking, you look around for the person who looks, pretty sympathetic and is going to kind of get what you're saying. But here it's like this whole sea. It's so great. Actually, when I wrote this book with Ram Dass, Walking Each Other Home, my real desire was, there were so many people, I've known him forever, and so I get to be with him and talk to him about things alone, and everyone, people say, oh, what did he say? I wish I'd been there, So that's really what I was trying to do in this book, by making it conversations of sharing that, because, yeah, I can feel it. So, and I also wanted to say that for me, I want to underscore that becoming nobody doesn't mean that you lose your voice. In fact, it's about discovering your real voice. It's about discovering, they say each soul has its own song, and your job is to listen for it and then to sing it. It's not about losing your voice. It's not about becoming invisible because you're nobody. Nobody can have all those implications. It's about becoming, who you really are. And my experience hasn't been like I had an awakening moment and then I've been on this path to become, and I'm a little bit less somebody every day. But it's been more about some moments in which there's a glimpse of what's in there, what's out there, what it can be, those moments. I was thinking this morning about the Bible, and I was thinking about the prophets in the Bible who were, they were like, they gave people a glimpse of what it would be to begin to awaken the inner radiance, the inner divine inside a human body that kept people kind of going until a being came who was the in total embodiment of the divine within the human. And I feel like we have these like prophetic moments in which we get a glimpse of who we really are, or what our real voice is. And then, of course, it goes away again. And but that keeps us going and inspires us as we go along. So I was, in terms of service, I was thinking about service is great, and SEVA, social justice activism. It's a great vehicle for remembering, for operating out of what Zen Buddhists call don't know mind, because you find yourself in circumstances over and over in which you have no idea what's going on, or what you can do to relieve suffering in that situation. We, through SEVA, SEVA was committed to relieving suffering and reducing blindness, mostly in India and Nepal. But for 10 years, Sunanda, who's here somewhere, and I worked with Mayan people in Guatemala, not on blindness, but it was after the worst violence in Guatemala. And we went there to work in the mountains, in these communities where people had lost everything. You know, in some communities, all the men had been killed, their houses had been burned down, they lost their animals. We went there, we were moved to go there when we experienced the suffering we met some widows who had come across the Mexican border. And the great thing about it was we had absolutely no idea what we could do to make a difference. We just felt Jack would say, the quivering of the heart and the desire to do something. We couldn't see the situation and not do anything. And so we went there and we had just sat on the ground in circles with people, Mayan people, and just listened and listened. In the beginning, we didn't even know Spanish, and it was their second language. I mean, we so didn't know. But what we knew was they were really hurting, and we knew we could do something to help. So we had to just not know and listen. And in that world of international development, a lot of mistakes get made. There's a long history in Central America of gringos coming from the north and laying on various, ideas of how life should be there. And we so didn't want to do that. But what worked in our favor was we genuinely didn't know. We didn't have to practice don't know mind. But we stayed for 10 years and we learned a lot and some amazing things happened. So I grew so much during that time, and of course, Mayan people have a very deep earth-based spirituality that really fed and balanced what I had grown up with. And I had grown up as a Catholic girl from preschool through Georgetown Graduate School, and then went to India all that time and discovered Hinduism and Buddhism. So this really balanced it for me and opened me up. So the service is a great vehicle for that. And I thought of one other thing about, this is about service, but it's also about how these moments of awakening and are not, they don't always seem holy when you're experiencing them. They can be extremely mundane. And one time I was, after the SEVA work, I founded with other folks an organization called the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society. And our mission was to bring these contemplative practices into mainstream institutions and professions. And at that time, the only place it was happening was in health and healing, but we started in '95. And so nobody was doing mindfulness and business or anything like that. So, I was the executive director, and there was a person who is a dear friend, but was the chair. But he didn't quite, well, I hadn't gone to Yale Law School, and I was a girl, so I didn't get quite the appreciation from him that some other people did. So anyhow, we're in a restaurant. He was in a restaurant meeting with the new vice president of Ford Foundation, and I was there with somebody else. And I walked past their table as I was leaving, and he said, "Oh, Mike, I want you to meet Mirabai. She's doing this really interesting project." So we met, and he said, "This is Mirabai Bush." And so the new vice president of Ford said to Charlie, "The Mirabai Bush?" It's the only time anyone has ever said that. Was funny. Yeah, I guess so. But anyhow, it turned out that Bill Ramdas and I had written a book before this one on service. And he had read it, and he also was looking for voices that talked about the integration of the inner world of compassion and the outer world of service. So he had quoted me in his book, you know, I had never heard of it, but so anyhow we started talking, and it turned out that his guru was Guru Mai, and her teacher was Swami Muktananda, who I had met through Ramdas. And in fact, we met Swami Muktananda the day after we first met Maharaji, and Ramdas had already agreed to meet him for Shiva Ratri, which is an all-night chant to Shiva. And you know, you can imagine the zone we were in after 3 months of meditation and then meeting Maharaji, and then so, okay, we're going to chant all night to Shiva. Sounds good to me. So we did that. That's how I met Muktananda. And then, anyhow, so I told Mike the story, and he said, "Well, let's have tea sometime." I said, "Great, we'll have tea." And so he said, "Come on up to my office." I said, "Great." So next time I was in New York, I said, "Okay, I'll go there." And I went to have tea and talk about Muktananda, right? So we talked about all these things we cared about, and about service and compassion, and then at the end, and I was running the organization, and I was always desperately fundraising. I had to raise $1 million a year for meditation. Then in 1995, no. So I was, but I went there to talk about Muktananda. At the end of it, he said, "So in this work you're doing, what are you most passionate about?" And I said, it's the only time I've ever said this, but I said, "Well, we're doing this research project on what's going on in the country now about where people are introducing practice or doing it in their professions or whatever." And he said, "That sounds really interesting. Do you think you'll find anything?" I said, "Oh yeah, I know we will." He said, "Well, I think we could help with that." And I said, "Oh, you mean Ford Foundation could fund meditation?" And you have to remember this a long time ago. And he said, "Oh yeah," he said, I could do it myself with the funds that I give out, you know. He said, "Why don't you when you go home, just write up 2 pages and for 100,000 and just send it to me." And I remember I got outside that monolith of a building in New York, and I was just like, I can't believe this. And as I look back, this all has a point, which was that I had no desire. There was no place in me where I was trying to manipulate him to get anything from him. I wasn't there with a purpose. I was really there just being another seeker on the path. And sure enough, the 100,000 came raining down from heaven. So.
Became a nobody.
It's beautiful, Mirabai. I have to say, if I were going into Ford Foundation, those thoughts would have occurred to me. just say it.
Someone said you're the only person who's ever entered this building without the desire for money.
Hallelujah. I want to pick up on one line that you read from Khyentse Rinpoche, and ask Mirabai and say something or ask you. And it's the beginning where he says, look constantly into the mirror of your mind and check whether your motive is for yourself or for others. And there's a kind of teaching that one gets sometimes. The language that's used in the Tibetan Buddhist community is to avoid self-cherishing actions and self-cherishing thoughts. And it's kind of related to that. And while Khyentse Rinpoche, great being, I'm sorry, I'm not down with that. Because it's easy to misinterpret it, again, as a kind of denial of yourself. And one of the things that's really critical, and especially so as we're trying to translate these Dharma teachings and the teachings of love into the West, is that compassion doesn't work if one person is left out of the circle. It just doesn't move. And that person that has to be included for it to really work is, as Miss Piggy would say, moi, right? Is yourself. So the question has to be not, is this in service of the world or is this in service of others? Is this also compassionate for this one? And there's a kind of spread now, as many of you know, of mindful self-compassion and so forth, not as self-indulgence, but there's a way in which, whether we talk about it in modern psychological terms of codependence, or whether we talk about the kind of patriarchal structures of women who are supposed to serve and negate themselves, that there's some way in. So I want to ask you, Mirabai, about these teachings. Because there's something about serving that's really liberating and being free. That you were the only person who walked into Ford Foundation ever without any desire. But what have you learned as a woman in this, in some ways, very patriarchal cultural system that denies, in a lot of ways, caring for oneself? Is that a fair question?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I just go back to, in as much as you can love yourself, you can love others. And if I don't love myself, how can others love me? But yeah, I mean, there is, particularly in the world of activism, there's people feel that it is selfish to take care of yourself because there's so much suffering in the world. And if you take time out to do something for yourself, like do a retreat or something. We did a lot of retreats for social justice activists. It was really hard for them because they're in presence of so much suffering. But once you get it, once you do some of those practices and you see that in taking care of yourself, you're so much more available. You're so much more, I mean, people don't talk that much about, the effects of practice opening up possibilities and opening up creativity. But like in situations like I was talking about in Guatemala and so on, you kind of be really creative as an activist to relieve suffering, and in any field, and it keeps changing all the time. So you really have to be awake and alert to do that. And in order to do that, you have to take care of yourself and keep your own mind open. So, I mean, it's partly about being a woman, but it's also partly about being a human who, recognizes that we're all interconnected and none of us are free until all of us are free. And also generationally, it's changing. I'll give you a two-liner. There may be a few humans left who don't know that I have a divine granddaughter named Dahlia. So Dahlia's graduating, I can tell this really fast. Dahlia's graduating from 4th grade. You graduate from 4th grade now. And so I'm sitting on a bench at a picnic table outside after, and a little boy walks by. And he's, she says, "I don't like him." I've never heard her say that about anyone. I said, "Why not?" She said, "He's mean to me." You remember mean, 4th grade. "He's mean to me." I said, "What?" What? What did he do? What did he say? She said, "He said the worst thing about me." "What, Dahlia?" "He said, I have a fixed mindset." And then she said, "And I don't." And she does not go to a Quaker school or a Buddhist school, or she goes to a school. That's it. No, and it's different now, so we can be a little more positive about the future.
Really, that's so good. One of the other, of course, major theme in the movie is towards the end around death and perspective from Ram Dass about that. And I mean, I think many of you know, or most of you know, Mirabai mentioned the book Walking Each Other Home that she did with Ram Dass. Can you show that? That's in the back. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful book. Really beautiful. And by the way, Mirabai tomorrow will sign some copies for those of you who want to do that after the session she's doing, second in the morning tomorrow. But I think that that's one of the most powerful moments in the movie toward the end there, where Ram Dass really helps to loosen up the grip that most of us have around the fear of death. And I think at this point, it might be good for us maybe just to say a little bit, how about from perspective of your training, Jack, around the things that help loosen that grip of fear.
So, this is a little bit of an aside, but when Ram Dass is talking in the movie about death, he talks about, at that time, I think he referred to him as his favorite spook or something like that. He talks about this disembodied teacher, Emmanuel, who was channeled by a woman named Pat Rodegast, who's a friend. And Pat used to come on retreats, very dear, lovely being. And she would have a really hard time when she'd come and meditate. I'd be working with her as her teacher. And I'd say, "Pat," I said, "all this great wisdom comes through you, and now you're sitting and you're struggling with your, your thoughts and your judgments and forgiveness, and like, what's the story?" And she said, "Oh, Emmanuel says he won't help me. I have to do it myself." And there was something really interesting about that, whoever Emmanuel is, but it just shows you a little bit of the distinction between our personality, of who we think we are in some fashion or other, and then the access that we have to some deep and universal wisdom. So, let's see, your question was about death. What was it again? Say something from the Buddhist perspective.
Yeah, that would help loosen up the grip that many of us have around that fear.
First, I just want to say that fear is natural, that the body carries it. And I remember coming back from the years that I spent as a Buddhist monk and training in monasteries. And after I had disrobed, left my robes, I was driving down the Massachusetts Turnpike, and a tractor trailer a little ways in front of me lost part of its tire, and it flew up and it smashed into the windshield of another car, which then crashed into another. It was like this beginning to be a pileup of high-speed accident, and I'm there, And I was really chill from these years of mindful zombie walking and meditating and so forth. And so I was very calm, like, oh, this might be the day I die. Look at this. It's, oh, wow, you know, it looks like everybody's going to crash into each other. I was surprised how calm I was. And then my body kicked in and it says, no you don't, baby, and gripped the steering wheel, wrenched it around onto the grass while we're still going 60 miles an hour, and says, I'm not ready to, you might be chill about it, but we're... So this is an important piece of information that, you know, we have different dimensions of ourselves, as Ramdas said in the film, Changing Channel. And the body doesn't want to die. It's not a very easy thing for it to die, and it likes being here, even in the end when it's difficult. And there's a part of you, of us, that knows that this isn't who you are. My teacher Ajahn Chah called it the one who knows. There's a part of you that understands that you're not this body, and that death is as natural as taking off a shoe, as Emmanuel said. And what's important in some way is to tune into that part, to realize that you actually do know this, and at the same time to respect the fears, not to try and get rid of it or judge yourself, saying, of course the body wants to live, that's its natural thing, and it's fine, it's not who I am. And that perspective helps enormously.
Yeah.
That's nice.
And Robert Svoboda talked yesterday about the reptilian brain, that it is natural for us to act in a survival manner. And the same thing happened in an accident, actually, with Parvati and Sunanda in the room. And we had just come back from India in a bad snowstorm, and I was driving my father's car, and it was an old Citroen, and it was front-wheel drive. There wasn't a lot of cars in front-wheel drive, and you're not supposed to. You're supposed to hit the accelerator and turn out, not turn in. And it turned in and flipped like 4 or 5 times over and over. And I did Ram. I remember Ram Ram. I couldn't believe. I was also calm, and I did Ram Ram. Next thing I knew, I was outside the car about 15 feet and hearing this screaming, which was Parvati, if you're here, but underneath the car. And everything, of course, in that second, everything changed, the way it changed the grip, the wheel. But yeah, so but it led me to know that there is a natural thing within me in that moment that went in the right direction. And then, of course, it backed off as fear came in. Yeah. Now, Mirabai, in the writing of this book, Walking Each Other Home, spent a lot of time with Ramdas discussing this major subject, and it's so beautiful because it's treated in a way that is just real. It's not head-tripping about what to do about dying and what to do about fear, and the naturalness that she created with these words is quite extraordinary. And just a little bit maybe describing what that process was like sitting with Ramdas.
He's just coming in now, so.
There you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, just say a little bit.
Well, this is something that you all can do at home. When I kind of distilled the experience, it was, we said to each other that, of course, Ramdas, I went back and read Be Here Now, and it was all there. It was all there. But it's different to write it at a certain time in your life and then to live your life. And, you know, of course, we're learning every day. So Ramdas really wanted to put out what he knows now. And so we said, but the danger is always that you're going to go on automatic, you know, and say it the way you always said it. You know. So we made a promise to each other. We said, okay, we're going to go into this room together. I mean, over and over these 2 years. But, and we're going to say what we know, just say what we know, and not say what we don't know. And if it doesn't make complete sense, it's okay. And if it's just fragments, it's okay. We're just going to do that. And that's what we did. And it was so great. So you can do this with anyone. You don't have to be talking about death, you know. You just like make that promise to each other. You just, I mean, we could say, we could make that promise 24/7, you know, for everybody, but in fact, of course, we don't do it. But if you make it, you know, like a practice, it was so cool. I just kept coming. I'd start like seeing words and sentences form that I had said so many times, and then I just question them, look into them. Oh, I had this, that investigate. Is this really what I think? Is it really what I know? I found this, I was reading Ta-Nehisi Coates, you know, his work. He said, I betrayed the wonder in me by privileging the appearance of knowing over the work of finding out. Isn't that good?
Yeah.
So that's what we were doing. We were doing the work of finding out. And then I recorded it on my little iPhone. Thank you very much. And you know, it barely needed to be edited. I mean, I'm a good editor, so I did do a little editing, but I mean, it was just there. It was really, there weren't any like long passages of like, oh, that's boring, you know. So anyhow, that was the practice, and I offer it to you all. And the other thing I want to say is that in the beginning, when we first started talking, I didn't think I had like a whole lot of, like, I wasn't like terrified of death. Well, at least I wasn't aware that I was. But of course, I had stuff around it. But spending 2 years talking about it and thinking about it, and I read other things about it, and it really changed it for me without me like trying to do that. And I mean, I thought I was writing a book, but actually I was really learning and letting go. And so a lot of people say, why should I think about death? Like I you know, teach the incoming first-year students at Amherst College. They do not want to hear about death. But why should, just bringing it into mind, however you do it, whether it's conversations or reading or practice, however you do it, it's so helpful. And it really will, those fears will naturally start falling away.
Lovely. Thank you, everybody. So before Ram Dass comes up, maybe we can take a couple of questions about this or anything, the film, or anything that's on your mind. So maybe guys over there can get a microphone going. And anybody got any question?
What happened to Parvati?
Oh.
Where is she?
All right, yes. Parvati was, yeah, so she was pinned under the car. So when I came out of, I don't even know where I went after the Ram Ram, and I ended up on the ground. I had to go out, and my sister-in-law was pregnant, she's here, Sunanda, and she was in the back seat with my brother, and they couldn't get out. And I had to run out in the street and hail cars, and got a bunch of people to lift the car up and pull her out. And both of them were in the hospital. She broke her hip. Is it hip? Can't remember. Where are you, Parvati? Okay, what broke? Well, you need a microphone because no one's going to hear you. Okay, you get this response.
What you forgot was that about a week before this accident happened, we had passed another accident on the side of the road where there were bodies, like 5 bodies laid out, 3 of which looked like very small children. And so as this car flew off, our car flew off the road, the first thought is, well, oh my God, we're going to die. I mean, we just saw this. And part of me was going Ram, 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 Ram. And then I lost consciousness, and I came back hearing somebody screaming, and then found out it was me. So Yeah, so I broke my pelvis, so when they pulled me out from under the car, it was slightly painful. But it was, for years afterwards, I asked almost every spiritual, quote, teacher I came across, well, what would have happened to me? Half of me was going ram, 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 and the other half was screaming. And it's just like what Jack was talking about. You know, the body was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. And the other half was just doing ram, ram, ram.
Yeah. They're on, yeah, multiple planes at the same time. Anybody else, question? Okay, I see somebody there. The mic is coming.
No pun intended.
So thanks for this discussion. And of course, this is a process that's going on inside me right now because I'm relatively close to death. And I hear Ram Dass, Manuel, Reb Zalman all saying that dying is like taking off tight shoes or taking off a tight girdle. And that sounds great, you know, and that should be the end of the discussion, you know. At some point, the tight shoes are going to come off. It's all good. We've had a great life. But I think, well, hopefully we've all had a great life. But I think there's another piece, and it's the piece that I'm dealing with is not death, which I have no fear of, but is dying. And the process of dying, and probably the way, in fact, I will die with what I have. And there's so many other issues. The issues of having people that are very close to you watch you suffer deeply, and then them suffering because of that. And how do you make choices? I don't want to make this too long. I'm not going to ask for another book. But I just want to say there's a lot more pieces. And unfortunately, during the first half of the kirtan last night, they were all attacking me. Like, what's it going to be like that day I say I don't want any more of this treatment, you know, and what happens, and how gruesome is this going to get, et cetera, et cetera. So if there's a question in there, I'd appreciate a shot at it.
For you, it's about letting go.
I thought you were the expert on it.
Nope.
First, I just want to get quiet and feel the tenderness of that question. Because it's yours, but it's also ours in some way. There's the question of death, but also the question of dying. And you articulated it's not just your suffering, but it's our suffering. How do we stand in the presence of that? And I can't answer that really. I don't even know how it's going to be for me. I know that when you say that, I also hear Ram Dass's voice, and I've been kind of marveling at how he has been in the 20 years, more since his stroke, talking about suffering as grace. And I barely want to let that come through my lips because it would denigrate the pain and the suffering if it's understood in the wrong way, because it's tough and hard. But I've also sat with enough people who are dying to see that there's a point at which the luminosity of who we are takes over, and it's so much bigger than the pain and the suffering. And I've seen it again and again. And there's this equivalent of dying being like a birth process, if you will, which also can be terribly painful, I'm told, by those the other half of humanity that knows this. We have to do it somehow. We have to do it, and it won't be easy. It's messy and painful, and you'll weep, and you'll also weep for those around you. And I remember sitting with my youngest brother and his wife, Esther. And Esther was just this beloved, beautiful being when she was dying of cancer. And I'd been with her some of the time talking, and it was pretty close. And I sat with them, And she knew she was going to die in the next few days. And my brother, who was really attentive and so forth, really didn't want to let her go. She'd suffered a lot. And I sat with them, and they gazed at each other in this time when we came together, the way you did yesterday morning when you looked in each other's eyes. And they didn't say anything for, I don't know, it seemed like eternity, but it was probably 15 or 20 minutes. And in it, she was saying, I have to go. I have to go. And there were tears. And he was just gazing at her some way, saying, I have to let you go. So it's an amazing process. It can be suffering, terrible, tender, and it's also extraordinary. And we're all in the queue, baby. You may be going there, but we're with you. It's all of us.
Thank you, Jeff. Time for maybe just a couple, somebody? One. Yeah, one more. Oh, Jeff. Pass it down.
Hello. First of all, I just want to thank you for that question. That was so brave and lovely. I wanted to ask Mirabai and whomever else might want to chime in about your experience in working with people who are suffering and have suffered in ways that maybe we as Westerners who come to help haven't experienced, particularly with the perspective in mind that for many of us who have a spiritual practice, we enter that from a place of privilege, and it's in many ways a very sort of isolated practice. And I'm curious about what you've learned from being in a direct experience of people who don't have the luxury of learning about these practices, but have a lot of gifts to give us in terms of their own wisdom and the wisdom that passes through them by virtue of their own suffering or otherwise.
They say the first rule of social activism is start where people are. It's the same when you're a teacher of practice, you know. It's no different from other relationships in which you, as much as you can, hold simultaneously the level in which you're just like me, we're humans here together, and at the same time that we have these differences, and we can help relieve suffering in each other at different times in different ways, and it's not all obvious. And so you just like keep returning to that place of truth and love, and I mean in the time in Guatemala, I mean I received probably so much more than we gave, but it was posing as, you know, us giving. So it's the same as your work or relationships with anybody. It's just letting go of preconceived ideas about who people are, just being with them and being loving, and then being smart and figuring out what you can do that isn't going to cause more suffering.
What did you do in Guatemala beside that beautiful communion? Did you actually find specific things that?
Oh, I'll tell you later. But
Okay.
We worked in sustainable agriculture, village development, education, empowerment of women, etc.
Thank you.
So Ram Dass is coming up now, so we'll do more sessions where there'll be a chance to ask questions. So. Jack and Trudy are going to be here tomorrow morning. Maybe you'll do some of that. So here's Ram Dass. Mike is coming.
That is for
Krishna, yeah.
Put you in
Krishna is joining us as well.
bookends.
Yeah. So we're going to do some mantric practice, mantra, and you want to come up too? Come. Ramesh is going to come. This is when we first did this, that I remember when we were collectively in India with Maharaji. We were up in a mountain village named Kosani, and we were supposedly we're going to be doing meditative practice with a teacher of Jack's as well, Munindra, right? He couldn't make it, so Maharaji used it as an opportunity to send every Westerner that came near him up to be with Ram Dass, who didn't want anybody near him, except maybe the 3 or 4 people who were with him at the time. And that was Ramesh and Krishnadas and I and a couple of others.
He didn't want us either.
He So one thing we used to do on certainly every week, if not more, would be to go. We were in a Gandhi ashram in his library where he wrote a few of his books, actually. And so we would go there and we would do this mantra repetition. We were just learning all of these mantras at the time. I mean, Ram Dass had known them and brought back a few of them when he first came back from India. So this is a very efficacious practice, a little different from what we're doing with Krishna Das, which is using rhythm and melodies, and this is just straight out repetition of mantra. So, Ram Dass?
Good.
Which mantra should we do? We have a lot of choices. I mentioned to you yesterday the one that you brought back. It's the first one I ever did, which was Sri Ram, Jai Ram. You want to do that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so Krishnadas, how about you lead? So this is, you're just doing this. It doesn't need to be particularly in sync or not in sync. It can be. The idea is to do it in the same way that Krishnadas talks about. As soon as your mind starts to wander from the mantra, you bring it back. And it's the same methodology that Jack teaches around the beginning practice of Vipassana, Anapana, concentration part. So just as soon as you feel that you're lost wherever you are, just bring it back to the mantra. As Jack's and our really great friend Sharon says, that's the beauty. You can always come back. You can always come back. Okay.
So just speak it to yourself out loud, in any rhythm, any note, any speed. Don't try to mesh with anyone else. Just do what you do, and everything will mesh. Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram, Jai Ram.
we first got with Maharaji, one of the first things we noticed, he was constantly doing Ram Ram. He was not with a mala, but with the digits of his hand, his fingers. Ram, Ram, Ram. You could see him doing it, and sometimes he'd be mouthing. You could see him Ram, Ram. So it is a saving grace. Ram Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram. Available to use anytime, any place. So I think we're going to transition now to next session, and Krishnadas is going to sit with Robert and have a chat. So a little bit of a break, 10-minute break, how about that? And then we'll get back here, okay? Thank you. Thank you.